Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a deeply fascinating part of history. We're going to specifically unpack exactly why the Kachin conflict in Myanmar ignited back in 1961. We'll be looking at this entire historical buildup through the lens of cultural preservation, exploring how a people's fight to maintain their distinct identity has literally echoed through centuries and continues to shape the region today. To really get a grip on this history, let's start with a rather unexpected modern metaphor. Take a look at this recent system log from our sources. A user actually asked an AI to generate an energetic Burmese hard rock song with deep male vocals, and the requested title, Trap. Well, the AI completely failed. It threw an error and couldn't generate the track. That system failure and the title, Trap, is actually a perfect analogy for what we're talking about today. It perfectly mirrors how an incredibly promising political system completely broke down, ultimately becoming a massive political trap for the Kachin people. And that very modern desire to create and protect Burmese music leads us right here. This highlights a platform called the AlterBug Myanmar Songs Podcast. Based on our sources, AlterBug is set up to ethically champion Myanmar's musical artists across major streaming platforms today. Their main rule? They want original song owners and artists to benefit directly from their exposure. It's a modern, digital fight to protect distinct cultural voices. But to truly grasp why protecting that distinct cultural voice is so absolutely crucial in Myanmar today, we really have to rewind the clock.
Okay, let's look at our roadmap for today. We just touched on modern voices and digital traps. Next up, we'll trace the origins of the Jade Hills, sweep through the colonial era and World War II, examine the promises of Pang Long, and finally, hit our main focus, 1961, the breaking point.
Section 2. Origins of the Jade Hills. Our journey takes us way up into the rugged, mountainous northern reaches of modern-day Myanmar, tracking a migration from the Tibetan Plateau that happened around the 15th to 16th centuries. Now, what's super interesting here is that the Kachin are not just one single monolith. They're this vibrant tapestry of 6 distinct ethno-linguistic clans. You've got the Jingpa, Maru, Lashi, Atsi, Rawang, and Lisu. Originally, they practiced animism and spirit worship, and these fiercely independent village communities were traditionally ruled by hereditary chiefs called duas.
And because of those fiercely independent clans, the Kachin held incredible historical geopolitical leverage. Think of it like a giant natural fortress. For centuries, they lived in a mountainous buffer zone right between massive lowland powers like the Burmese kingdoms and Imperial China. While those lowland armies really struggled to navigate the brutal terrain, the autonomous highland Kachin held all the cards. They completely controlled the strategic high mountain passes and those vital trade routes connecting Yunnan to the Irrawaddy Plains. They were formidable, highly sought-after allies who operated entirely on their own terms.
Moving on to the colonial era and World War II. So that fiercely independent status quo, it was eventually shattered. Let's look at the timeline here, because things move fast. We're tracking massive, rapid shifts, starting with the British annexation of Upper Burma in 1885, crashing straight through the global wreckage of World War II, leading into the historic Pang Long Agreement of 1947, and finally arriving at the nation's independence in 1948.
Let's zoom in on that British era for a second. It actually took the British years of fighting Kachin guerrilla resistance to subjugate those northern hills. But once they did, they administered the Kachin Hills completely separately from lowland Burma. This sparked a massive cultural shift. American and European missionaries arrived and widely converted the Kachin population from animism to Christianity. Keep that fact in your back pocket, because it is absolutely critical for understanding the explosion of conflict in 1961. The British also developed a Latin-based script for the Jingpa language and began heavily recruiting the Kachin into colonial armed forces.
And man, did that military recruitment pay off during World War II. While the lowlands were occupied by the Japanese and the Burma Independence Army, the Kachin remained fiercely loyal to the Allied forces. The Allies knew exactly what they had: unmatched combat prowess. They utilized elite Kachin guerrilla units, like the legendary Kachin Levies and the American-led OS Detachment 101. These guys operated deep behind enemy lines, dealing crushing blows to Axis supply chains, totally cementing their reputation as world-class jungle fighters. Which leads us to the promises of Pang Long. After the dust settled from World War II, the Kachin's immense military contributions gave their leaders serious political leverage. So they sit down at the table. The result is this incredibly historic document, the Pang Long Agreement, signed on February 12, 1947. This was the foundational blueprint to unify the entire nation. It was championed and signed by the legendary Kachin leader Samadua Sinwanong alongside General Aung San and various other ethnic leaders. At the time, this agreement was overflowing with optimism. It fundamentally guaranteed full internal autonomy for the frontier hill areas. It promised a democratic federal union structure and equal rights for all ethnic nationalities. Early Kachin leaders were all in. They enthusiastically embraced this new Union of Burma, which directly led to the official birth of Kachin State in 1948. Samadua Sinwanong even stepped up as a prominent national figure. It really looked like a bright future was ahead. But then we hit 1961, the breaking point.
Right, so here is the crux of the entire explainer, exactly why the Kachin conflict started. This comparison lays it out perfectly. You have the 1947 promise of equal federal autonomy on one side and the 1961 reality on the other. Over the years, those federal promises were being systematically sidelined. But the absolute breaking point, the literal spark that ignited decades of war, was in 1961 when Buddhism was temporarily declared the state religion of Myanmar. Remember that massive conversion to Christianity under British rule we talked about earlier? Yeah. This state religion declaration severely and deeply alienated the heavily Christian Kachin population. It made them feel like second-class citizens in the very union they helped build.
So how did they react? Well, in direct and immediate response to those specific events in 1961, a group of young Kachin intellectuals essentially said, the political route has failed us. They took matters into their own hands and formed the Kachin Independence Organization, the KIO, and its military wing, the Kachin Independence Army, or KIA.
The goals of the KIO and KIA were completely unambiguous. They launched what would become a decades-long struggle for self-determination. They were fighting to defend their distinct culture and to protect their ancestral lands. And it's worth noting, those lands happen to sit on top of vast natural resources. We're talking rare earth minerals and literally some of the finest jade on the planet. That buffer zone advantage they held for centuries was now the battleground for their very identity.
Which brings us full circle to our final thought today. From the AlterBug podcast, working right now to ensure modern Burmese musicians get ethical treatment and keep their voices, all the way back to the 15th century mountain clans fighting to maintain their autonomy. The theme is undeniable, isn't it? The breaking point of 1961 wasn't just some dry policy change. It was viewed as a direct existential threat to a distinct way of life. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I'll leave you with this to ponder. How does the Kachin people's unyielding pursuit of true federal equality mirror the broader, ongoing struggle to protect diverse cultural identities in our world today? Thank you so much for joining me to explore the fascinating history of the Jade Hills.